Welcome to the Heritage Committee for the 28th of July 2022. My name is Andrew Kearns and I'm the Manager of Strategic Planning at Hawkesbury Council. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that whilst we've each come from the traditional lands of different custodians, we are meeting today from Darug country, and the matters covered in the work of this committee are connected with Darug and Darkinjung country as the traditional custodians of the land. I pay my respect to all elders past, present and emerging, and would like to take a few moments to express what for me it means to live and work on Darug land. For me, it's my connection to the landscape that has been managed by the traditional custodians for tens of thousands of years before I came to live and work on Darug land. For me, it's the Darubin River that meanders through the Darug country that is such a defining feature and provides the water and rich, nourishing soils from which the food I eat is grown. It's the treed mountains, escarpments and hillsides that provide us shade and habitat for our unique fauna. It is the clear and endless skies which on a clear and fresh morning like this morning make me realise that I'm alive and well on Darug country. And we're very lucky in this term of the Heritage Committee that we actually do have two Darug representatives, and I'd like to hand over to Erin Wilkins now to respond. Yep.
Thank you, Andrew. So that was lovely acknowledgement, very heartfelt, your personal space. As cultural protocols, when there are Darug people present on Darug lands in a meeting, the traditional owners, or what we call traditional custodians, always take precedence and do a welcome to country. It's just about keeping cultural safety in space. So in saying that, thank you, Andrew, and I invite Cindy to do our own welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Warami, Wujuri Gumra, Midige Garambara, Burubarango, Darkinjung, Ipai Mara, Derban, Daru. Today we're sitting on Burubarango country, the kangaroo people of the Hawkesbury River, with the connections to Darkinjung not very far away, which that word actually means all the little beaches, Patonga, Pearl, Yamina Beach. And that area comes into the back of Wiseman's, meeting the borders of the Darug, and through Wallamai up into Noons to meet Radri. Very close relationship between Gunungara, Radri, Burubarango and Darkinjung. Burubarango being a part of the Darug language groups. So welcome to Darug country today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erin and Indy. Yeah. So just a few other procedural matters. So committee members and members of the public attending the meeting in council chambers are advised that in the event of an emergency, you will be asked to proceed in an orderly manner to the nearest exit, following the guidance of our warden. I'd also like to advise that meetings of the council committees are recorded. In terms of the Privacy and Personal Information Protection Act, these may involve the recording of personal information provided at the time of the meeting. The recordings are made to assist staff in compiling the minutes of the meeting and to enable the podcasting of council committee meetings. The provision of any information that is recorded is voluntary. If any person does not wish to be recorded, they should not address or request to address the meeting. The recordings may be made available to other persons where such access is in accordance with the relevant regulations. Recordings are stored on council's record management system. In terms of mobile phones, as a courtesy to others, it is requested that mobile phones either be turned off or turned to silent. So being the first meeting of the Heritage Committee, the first point of order is to elect a chair. So the new term has commenced. This is the first meeting. So the election of a chairperson will be conducted by myself as the Manager of Strategic Planning. Therefore, I call for any nominations for the chairperson of the Heritage Committee.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Danielle Wheeler.
Okay. Councillor Lyons Bucket nominates Councillor Wheeler. Do we have a seconder for that? Michelle Nichols has seconded that. Yeah. Do we have any other further nominations? No. Okay, so we have one nomination for chairperson. So, sorry, I should have asked Councillor Wheeler, do you accept that nomination? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yes. Yeah. So the one nomination for chairperson, Councillor Wheeler. In that case, I declare Councillor Wheeler the chairperson of the Heritage Committee, and I'll now hand over the committee meeting to Councillor Wheeler to chair the balance of the meeting.
Thank you. And thank you for your confidence in me. I hope this committee is as successful as the last Heritage Advisory Committee, where we all benefited greatly. And I think it's worth noting actually that committee was so successful that it was the only committee to survive the committee's rearrangement with community members intact. So thank you all for coming and for being willing to give your time and energy, and most particularly your knowledge to this committee, but also to council as well. Sorry, I've managed to turn on the torch on my phone by walking across the room. We've got two members online as well, I think, Jan Barclay-Jack and Gay Wilson. Is that all we've got online? Yeah. Okay. To Jan and Gay, if I don't pick up that you've got your hand up, could you feel free to yell? So just take yourself off mute and call out if I keep missing you. Do we have any apologies?
So Councillor Reardon and Mr. Moxon.
Thanks, Andrew. So as required under the Code of Conduct, committee members are required to disclose any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests in relation to matters on today's agenda. Does anyone have any interest that they need to disclose?
Madam Chair, if I can disclose a pecuniary interest in item 5. I'm a recipient of one of the heritage grants.
Thanks, Michael. Anyone else?
Yes,
Right.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure whether I need to, but my company name is within one of the items in regard to the community-based heritage study.
So is that a significant, non-significant pecuniary?
I would say that's non-significant.
And that was item 4. Thanks. And I'll declare that I have a pecuniary interest in item 4 as well. I own a property likely to be listed under the Slab Barn study.
Madam Chair,
Yep, Councillor Lyons-Buck.
I'm just wondering if there is, you've just said you've got a conflict of interest, so is there an election of a deputy chair?
It appears not under the terms of reference.
Okay.
Do we want it? There is a change, I think, that probably needs to be made to the terms of reference, in that it calls for 3 councillors and we've got 4. Do we want to feed that back to council, that we need that updated? And do we want to put a deputy in place for occasions when the chair isn't available?
I think the standard practice is if the chair's not available, then the committee members on that particular night elect a chair to take the place of the chair.
Good, so you can have a movable feast. You can all have a turn. Right. And I think we can just feed the terms of reference back when the minutes come to council. So, all right, that's it. Yes.
I'm not sure if Zana Winery was one of the participants in the grant.
I think it was, yes.
So can I just,
Yes. Yep. So, yep. Thanks. That's item 5.
yes.
Yep. So that's a family member as a grant recipient.
Yeah, so it is.
Yep. Yep.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I did press my button, but I don't know.
Sorry.
That's all right. Just in relation to the terms of reference, I actually did look on council's website today to try to find them. but couldn't. So I'm wondering if they could be shared with the committee members. As I'm a new person on the committee, I'd really like to see what council expects of us being on this committee.
Andrew?
Yes, we can provide committee members the terms of reference. Yep.
Thank you.
And I think previously we've asked committee members to sign a code of conduct as well. Will that be coming? It's not in. Great. Okay, so you should receive those, and that's a matter of reading those and signing that you've received them.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll move. We've got no speakers this evening, but it's worth people keeping in mind, and anyone who might be watching this meeting, that that members of the public are able to address the Heritage Committee, and they can register to speak on Council's website. I don't think that we'll keep to hard and fast rules about people who have not been aware that they needed to register, who have turned up to speak. I think we can accommodate them should they wish to. But this evening we've got no speakers. So the first item, or the second item really, item 2, is the implementation of the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Study. That's you, Andrew? Yep.
So item 2 is talking about the implementation of Council's Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Study. So Council had undertaken the study following receipt of a grant from Heritage New South Wales, which was provided on a 50-50 basis. So half the funding from the state and half from council. The study explored how essentially a holistic assessment of Aboriginal heritage values can be undertaken and built into land use planning and environmental impact assessment. There are a number of site inspections and consultation with the local Aboriginal community and representative organisations, and those individuals and groups were very generous, both in terms of their time in imparting their knowledge about their sites and Aboriginal cultural heritage across the whole of the Hawkesbury, and that's added significantly to the quality of the study and its outcomes. To see that the study that the council was actually able to adopt. The previous Heritage Committee had also considered this study, so Council has adopted the study. Given this is the first meeting of the new committee, we consider it is essential that we do discuss the priorities from the study and potential opportunities for partnership arrangements in order to help implement the study. So obviously there's a number of management recommendations, both in terms of further assessment in terms of certain sites, and different programs in terms of that as well, interpretation strategies and further consultation. So essentially seeking input from and advice from the committee if there was any thoughts in terms of priorities or those potential opportunities for partnership arrangements.
Erin?
Can I just say, for those that are in here, I was part of that study group. I was part of that consultation phase. There's no financial throwback from that, but I also am part of the current Reconciliation Action Plan working group as well, which is referred to as part of the discussion management of that study.
So some of you will have seen this document came to the previous Heritage Advisory Committee before going to Council and then being adopted by Council. If you're not familiar with it, or for anyone who is listening in, if you're not familiar, this is a really it's a really informative document that covers all the way back to the geography of the formation of the Hawkesbury, as well as a lot of information about Darug culture. It's an incredible resource, I think, and we've been very lucky that people have given so generously to making that resource, and I really hope that we can build on it with other projects that we have. So the aim of this discussion, I think, Andrew, is to get some guidance on priorities for implementation. Is that right? Yeah. So has anyone had a chance to get to that point yet, or do we want to keep this as a live issue that we discuss at the next couple of subsequent meetings, and give you the opportunity to go back and consult with your communities to bring that information through? Graham?
Madam Chair, just in my knowledge of the document, and it is a very comprehensive document, from my point of view as a heritage architect, Madam Chair, the recommendation has actually asked us to actually give, I guess, some advice to council in respect of the implementation of the study. But when I look at attachment 1, and I think it's on page 42 of that attachment, and actually gives an implementation plan which identifies high, medium and low priorities. And I guess I would have thought that unless the Aboriginal community has any issues with that, that's possibly a way to start and follow.
Does anyone have any input on that list? Mary, you've got.
I had a question around process first. So just around how the committee goes. So when we have a recommendation, is it not moved? Is there no motion on the floor? So it's the reverse. No. Okay. The other thing was that I would like to ask if our First Nations representatives would perhaps outline anything within the study, which I think is an amazing document. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading it when I first had it. I look forward to reading it again. Whether they had any particular priorities that they saw in terms of what council could be looking at or what this committee could be looking at. And like Graham, I thought that, yeah, there is an implementation sort of schedule. So I think that maybe if they're happy to at least feed in and say what perhaps the priorities from their perspective are, so that then when people are thinking about it, they can bear that in mind.
Yep.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
You always do. I think the biggest priority is that Hawkesbury LGA covers such a vast area, and there is a lot of bushland. There is still a lot of undeveloped areas within our LGA. There are also a lot of parks and recreation spaces that are managed by council. And I think it is important that council and their workers understand the significance of recognising and identifying sites when they're out there, whether they have been recorded or not recorded on the AHIMS. And I think that just sets a precedence of their understanding and the cultural values of the landscape in which we all live as probably the foremost important that I would address on the study. The study was done a long time ago, so I can't remember exactly. I've read it so many times in draft.
Erin, can I just ask you to explain what the AHIMS are?
The AHIM stands for Aboriginal Heritage Impact Management Systems. That's right, isn't it? Aboriginal Heritage Information. Or what did I say? Oh, impact. I'm sorry. Yeah, we don't want to impact on that. So information management systems. As it stands, the AHIMS is held by national parks and government agencies. The AHIMS is actually undergoing review at the moment on who and how people can access the information. At the moment, not many people can access it. As a traditional custodial of the area, we don't even have full access. So we're working with the government under the consultation phase at the moment to try and see if traditional custodians wherever we come from have access to that. But it's about when we find a Aboriginal site, whether it be an artefact scatter, whether it be a modified tree, whether it be occupation sites, anything of cultural relevance, it gets registered and recorded on a national database for Aboriginal sites and relevance. So there's a lot in the Hawkesbury that actually has not made it onto AHIMS. And that comes down to a lot of the time the landowners are very resistant in letting people know that there are sites or things on their properties. So they go unanswered. But being able to combine a whole series of information about cultural sites and where they sit in the landscape actually helps our people to reconstruct and piece together stories or misplaced information and knowledge that unfortunately has been not saying lost because it's still there. We just have to find it and piece it back together. So it is really, really crucial to be able to understand the stories, the landscape, the history of the place, to be able to connect through AHIMS and through knowledge that unfortunately hasn't reached AHIMS yet. Does that answer that?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. That was very helpful. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Cindy and Erin. We have actually managed, just through your presence, to tick one of the boxes, which is an intermediate action, in that we finally have Aboriginal participation on the Heritage Advisory Committee. Long overdue. I think the last committee moved that happen, and here we are finally. So thank you both. We can tick something off. I guess the first question is, do you agree with the priority that's been laid out in this document? Do you want to take it away and think about it and bring it back to us with some modifications, and do some consulting, and we can hold this over to the next? Is that workable for council? Yep. Are you both happy with that as an outcome? Yep.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So I think the resolution before us, and normally when we have a council meeting, someone puts up a recommendation, someone moves it, and someone seconds it. The habit of this committee in its previous iteration has been to take on the information first, to construct a recommendation that meets what comes out of that discussion, and then for someone to move and second that resolution. So it looks like the resolutions of the Heritage Advisory Committee in the past have very rarely been identical to the ones provided in the business paper as a recommendation, and we shall probably continue that tradition. So I think the resolution that we have is that this goes back now is taken away by the direct representatives and discussed in their communities and brought back to council with a list of priorities. Is that what we're looking at, Graham?
Madam Chair, I guess I agree. I certainly agree with that. But I guess my thoughts were that this implementation plan that's been prepared by the consultants, and I would have thought in consultation and in vast consultation with the First Nations or Aboriginal community, that these would actually form the basis of any sort of implementation plan. I have no objection to it going and being refined and looked at again, but I guess I would have thought that the implementation plan in principle could be moved.
I would be much more comfortable with the direct representatives taking this away and coming back to us with what they want, rather than what we've put before them. I think that's a more open way for us to consult with that sector of the community.
Can I just
Erin?
respond to Graham? In that study, there was a lot of Aboriginal people living, working inside the LGA that was contacted. Unfortunately, there was a lot of people also that were not traditional custodians of country. And there was government agencies who put themselves in a position of cultural authority over traditional custodial people on knowledge and significance of their site. So that in itself is a comprehensive recommendation from all parties that were engaged. And probably my biggest thing is that there's a particular agency that was engaged in that study that is heavy-footed and very intimidating, and believes that they have cultural authority across any area that they believe is theirs.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Some of the recommendations imply that there's going to be, or demonstrate there would be a financial cost to actually implementing. Does council have the means to implement the recommendations? We fought long and hard to get Mr. Reeves on council, and one of the recommendations, which is a high priority, is to look at engaging a full-time or part-time staff member to specifically look after the administration of Aboriginal cultural heritage. Is that going to fall to Mr. Reeves' already overloaded workload? Or is that going to be a new staff member? And does council have the means to be able to fund such a position?
Andrew, do you want to comment on the logistics of it, and I'll comment on the strategy of it?
Yep. So I guess, I mean, yes, there's a number of priorities and in different categories there. And obviously, council's financial resources are not limitless. And so I guess this is why we really wanted to have this discussion with the committee to work out, of these priorities, what are the ones that we really should be tackling first, noting that the implementation does give the various importance of those items. Obviously, we've got a new senior heritage officer with council now from late 2021. There's a lot of work for Christopher to do in the heritage area. So, in terms of further additional staff, I can't necessarily say that. Yeah, there's definitely going to be resources available for additional staff. Immediately. Yeah, definitely not the case. Yeah.
I think the point of setting the priorities, even if we don't have the resources to pay for them up front, is that if we don't have policies, and what's happening particularly with the state government is that every time we ask for external funding for any position, even if it's matched funding to some capacity, we have to show the policies and the plans that sit behind those requests, and that this is a clear attempt to set that stuff in train as well before we can go forward. It also allows those of us who sit on this committee to make it very clear to council that this is a request from this committee and also from the local Darug community for those resources, so that when we come, this is actually a good time for us to be doing this. We're just at the beginning of the financial year. We've got the budget wrangling will start in earnest very early next year, and if this committee can have some priorities for things that we want funded, should there ever be a spare 50 cents, then we're on the front foot, because it's based on really solid consultation and solid policy and planning. So it leaves us in a much better position if we've done that first. But no, just because it's written in here as a high priority doesn't mean you're going to get it. Sorry.
Madam Chair, I guess just further to that, I think you mentioned in the preview to this document that council's actually adopted it. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I would have thought that if they've adopted it, they've accepted what the responsibility is and the priorities that are already here. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be twigged. So I guess I'm a little bit confused now with what you're saying, that it's all up for grabs.
No, just because we've got them listed in a document doesn't mean we've got the money for it. Otherwise, we would be making up long lists of priorities for all sorts of things. Council doesn't have a bottomless pot. We can't fund everything we want. That's the cold hard facts of being a small council over a large area with a small rates base. That's them's the breaks, sadly.
I'm sorry to dwell on this, but council has accepted this, and there's some timeframes that are actually noted in this implementation plan, and I guess that speaks for itself. If that's been adopted, then the timeframes are adopted.
I don't think anyone in this room is going to disagree with you, Graham, that this is important work that council should be doing, but I can't get blood out of a stone.
Can I just, I guess, add to or check my understanding with what Graham's just said? What I'm hearing from you is that the document has been accepted by council. It's been adopted. So I don't really understand why we're continuing it. If council has adopted it.
Because now we've got the opportunity to actually consult with the community and make a list of achievable priorities that we can move on with. It's come to council as a broad study, and now we need to work out what actions we're going to take forward.
Okay, thank you,
Michelle.
It does say that in the case of the a couple of those projects, it says that they're in the moderate area, which is 2 to 5 years, and it says seek funding. It doesn't actually say fund. So that would be something that council can work on, actually applying for the funding.
And it's really important to have this document in order to do that funding, in order to gain that funding. That's becoming a more and more contested space, unfortunately. What we also know about that space, though, is that the more, and I'm loath to use the term shovel ready, but that's the current catch cry. When we've got stuff that's ready to go, that we can say, look, we've done all this background work, we've got this project that's ready to move now, we're far more likely to get funding out of the various funding bodies prior to that. Mary?
I think the rationale of having the local community look at it again is not to change it as such at all, because it is what it is. It's to look at the potential possibilities of how perhaps they may access some funding to do a partnership with council, or to build some relationships around the things that are within this. So it's not really to have it come back in a different format. The passing it off again is to, from within there, to draw out what the priorities for our local Darug community are.
So we've got a resolution on the table that it goes back to the local Darug community now and comes back to us for a discussion of and a determination of revised priorities and actions for implementation. Can I have someone move that, please?
Sorry, Madam Chair, can I just have some wording in that, just to ask that it is identified when you're looking at the priorities of what you think is achievable, and what potential partnerships there are for that, because as we've identified, council can't do it alone and we won't be able to do it. So that might give it a bit more of a focus. So to put in that format.
Do you want to give me some words?
Well, I don't know what the first words were, but I think just to include that, to list any potential opportunities for partnerships within those priorities.
Does the minute secretary have that?
I'll get something out. Yep.
So okay. So is everyone clear on what you're voting on? Can I have someone move it?
I'll move it,
please. Can I have someone who's not a councillor move it? Erin, and Michelle is the seconder. Thanks. Is everyone in favour of that?
Sorry, do we not move?
I would rather that it came from the community than it came from councillors, given that it's really an advisory committee. I'll let you move something if I'm desperate. How's that?
No, I'm just because I am on some committees where the councillors don't move because they're non-voting. So just to clarify.
No, we are voting.
We're voting.
We are voting, but I
move.
would prefer that the recommendations come from it's not in the terms of reference, it's a personal preference. So I can't enforce it, is the short answer. Okay, are we all happy with that? I'm just checking online. All right, next.
Are we voting by hand? Or
you can.
Are we voting by hand?
Well, if you can just call out any dissent, I'm happy. I don't think you need to vote. We don't need to take names of votes, do we? We don't need to record votes, so that's fine. Right, item 3 says. Okay, so our next item 3 is the wayfinding and signage and the heritage interpretation trail. So Amanda's going to introduce that. Amanda, could you introduce yourself before you start that process? And then we're going to have a presentation from the consultant involved in that. So if I can just ask you to hang on to your questions until each speaker has finished. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Amanda Carney and I'm the Manager of City Design and Economic Development. So we're talking about item 3, the wayfinding and signage heritage interpretive trail. So council have engaged the blueprint to undertake a wayfinding signage strategy and guideline. The last committee had a presentation from the blueprint, but we thought it was important now with the change of committee that the consultants will take you through and give you a bit of a quick run through as to what's happened to date. The focus for tonight's presentation is around the Heritage Interpretive Trail. So you have received a copy of that content in the report. So this is an opportunity to for the committee to provide their feedback before this is finalised. And the next steps will basically be that we will undertake a councillor briefing to show the content to the council, and then looking at going out for tender to manufacture and install the signage. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Helen Punton from the Blueprint. She'll take you through a quick snapshot as to what's happened to date in terms of this project. And then Kate Follington will take you through a discussion in terms of the actual interpretive tale content. Over to you, Helen.
We got
Helen, you're just on mute.
still on, Helen. There you go.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll start again. Thank you, Amanda. I was just saying that the Wayfinding and Signage Strategy Project aims to improve how visitors and residents are guided through the Hawkesbury local government area to discover the diverse experiences, attractions and services that are on offer. So we put together these style guides last year, and now we're in the process of developing the content to be able to implement the signage. So the strategy was to develop a visual identity using clear and legible graphics, keep it unpretentious, make sure it's inclusive, and increase the knowledge of the heritage area through incidental interaction with engaging signage. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the signage suite. This is the Wayfinding suite. So it's based on the sandstone that is locally quarried. This signage suite is honed sandstone, so it's just got a flat finish, and it uses the brand fonts. We have maps and blades, so it just depends on what we need to identify at any one location. And based on the feedback from our community engagement and engagement with the councillors, we felt we need to differentiate between the whole LGA and the 5 Macquarie towns. So the heritage towns, we decided we needed to do something a little bit special and a little bit different. So for the heritage signage suite, we took the sandstone and we were using a sparrow peck finish, and that finish is like the convict's pickings on the sandstone. So it has a really beautiful heritage feel to it. And we've also changed the font here, the main font, to be a serifed font, so that you can see that it has more relationship to the heritage nature. So the signage suite, apart from these two elements, is identical because we need to have consistency across the precinct and the LGA in general, and also the construction methods. And we've also introduced this sort of rough cut, really large, beautiful sandstone. So really nice connection there to place. So the heritage signage suite is also inspired by the sandstone. And for the interpretive signage suite, our key sandstone bases are utilised throughout the Macquarie towns with the sparrow peck finish. And we'll have our interpretive content. We'll also have a QR code, which then links to more information on the website, because we'll be limited to how much we can put on a sign and how much people will engage. And we've also got room for photography. This could be single-sided or double-sided. We've also adapted this to be, if you've got existing infrastructure and it's not suitable to put a sandstone plinth in, we can utilise existing infrastructure and panels. We can also utilise rails, handrails. So we're trying to be flexible here and also cost-effective, provide some cost-effective solutions where we can't use the sandstone. So we've been developing this content. I'll hand over to Kate. Oh, also for the, sorry, I forgot to mention the blue plaque. So it was brought up through the council meetings that it was preferred to use blue plaques. So for all the colonial history, we'll be using blue plaques because it's universally known, and we can implement them on the paving or on the houses or street frontages. It depends on the building owners. And there's been a really positive engagement with the building owners. They've been really on board with the blue plaque system as well. So I'll hand over to Kate, and she will talk to you about the content that she has been developing with a lot of help and assistance.
Yeah, hello. Can everybody hear me okay? Hold on.
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me? Yeah, hold on one second. Can everybody else hear me as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for letting me speak at this meeting. It's been a long time coming and I'm really excited about this work. And good to see Erin and Michelle's faces because I've heard about you both. So basically the scope of the work was to look at both European and Darug history, and to have a look at the current heritage trail that's in paper form, and to have a look at where we could expand some of the stories out for a navigation trail. So I've been told to sort of stick with Windsor. The time frame or the time scope, the date frame, I guess, that I was a bit open, and so I ended up talking a little bit to Jan Barclay-Jack and looking at a lot of the content that's already been written around Windsor history, and really noticed that basically it's starting from 1791 with a significant jump and change after around 1820, when the community was more settled from a European perspective, and significant frontier war had occurred between the warriors of the Darug people and the settlers in the area. And so the vast majority of content, certainly around Windsor, is sitting around 1790 to around 1820 period, but also including content around the ongoing floods that devastated the town consistently, and those settlers, obviously. So I can run through the overall themes for the signs, but I presume that I'm going to be getting some feedback from you as a heritage committee. But basically, there's covering the penal colony and the British need for food, and the starving colony, South Creek, where the early river land grants were handed out for ex-convicts, the frontier wars, and the relationship between those early settlers and the traditional owners who were being displaced. That's from a European history perspective. Life on the floodplain. The Windsor Hospital and Convict Barracks is a location-based sign. St Matthew's Anglican Church. The Macquarie Arms Hotel, I felt it was quite interesting to talk about the fact that it has a long history of being, excuse my throat, of not only being a very old hotel, but has significant mythical stories related to it around it being haunted. And I also think that it's important to at least mention at least once in the heritage signage this ongoing, I guess the ongoing stories of the haunted Hawkesbury. Howe's House on Thompson Square and the arrival of the Coromandel settlers. The grain, corn and boat production around Windsor Wheel I was proposing, and the Grono's boats, history of boat building, but also river transport. Obviously being a Hawkesbury town, the river needs to feature. I've also included this idea of bolters and bushrangers, because it was a place that bushrangers liked to live around, because of the transport along the Windsor Road. And then the post office as a location-based sign. It was also on the original Heritage Trail, and John Tebbutt Observatories and the Great Comet discovery of 1861. So that's the more European side of the signage proposed for Windsor. And then from the Darug perspective, I've based this research predominantly on the work that Grace Karskens and the Darug descendants worked on together, because I think it's pretty impressive work, and also I think it's the most comprehensive history I've read of the Darug peoples. And so the Darug signage based around the river, I've included basic fundamentals, which I think is really important in talking about the Hawkesbury Nepean River as a river, and the significance of Dearabin in relation to, it's not only its significance from an ancestral perspective, but also as a geological beast, really, as we've seen. And also the fundamentals of Darug and Darkinjung nations. So the geographic boundaries of the Darug and Darkinjung peoples, their language groups, the significant bands of the Windsor and Richmond areas. I also felt it was important to touch on rock art, Polo, petroglyphs, and the grinding grooves because of the significance and of their significant presence all around the Hawkesbury River, and that many historians and archaeologists have commented that it's the significance and the scale of rock art around the Hawkesbury River by the Darug people certainly indicates and is evidence of that long-standing settlement of Darug people for tens of thousands of years. I also think it's very important to acknowledge that Gurungutty was discussed in Grace Karskens' historical analysis, and that it would be probably the first time I understand that Gurungutty, I hope that I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, Erin, feel free to correct me, that it would be the first time that this eel ancestral being would be introduced to the area. And so it'd be wonderful to acknowledge that, that Gurungutty was the great eel being of that region. I've included other cultural practices such as rock shelters, feast on country, the Dugga forest, and the fact that they were great climbers of those huge trees along the river's edge, and also significant Darug and Darkinjung warriors of that region, Black Captain, Yarramundi and Myron, but potentially both Yarramundi, Myron and Black Captain could also be included in the Richmond stories of Darug peoples. So just that's a general summary, I guess, of what I've covered for both Windsor and Windsor European and Darug history, and I'm honestly open to other ideas and feedback. I haven't had a chance to speak to Michelle from the local library yet. She's on my list of people to speak to, but I thought it would be wise to, have this initial conversation about my proposed themes and then go from there.
Thanks, Kate. Does anyone have any questions for Kate or for Helen?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just thank you very much, Kate and Helen. That was really interesting. I just have, as I read through the Windsor, the sites, the areas, I think they're very comprehensive. I just had a couple of other little suggestions that I wondered if there's capacity to add. If others, my colleagues on the committee think that they're worthy. I was thinking of the courthouse and the what remains of what I think was a barracks, a fort outside the old police station, and also the cemetery down by the river. So they were ones that I also I wondered if they could be incorporated. And additionally to that, I note that you've included Thompson Square and mention of Andrew Thompson. I'm wondering whether you were thinking of putting a sign near the location of what was Thompson's home. There's a section of brick wall there, and I just wondered whether that might be a good place to include signage about Thompson as well as in Thompson Square. Just a suggestion. I don't know what others think about those.
Kate or Helen, would you like to respond to that? And then does Jan have her hand up? And then we'll go to Jan.
I can respond to that because I think there's some question marks around Thompson Square. And that's mostly because I think there's been a lot of work done around Thompson Square. And so I was thinking that because the floods have such an impact and the evidence of the floods are around the square, I presume that would be a good location to talk about the ongoing flooding that is a reality of living in Windsor. As you know, I don't want to state the obvious. But I don't think we're clear on what is possible around that square in relation to more signage.
Thanks, Jan.
I just wondered, hello, Kate, thank you for that.
Hi, Jan.
I've just been doing a lot of work on the original village, and it was incorporated holus bolus into Macquarie's town. So I'm hoping that whatever comes out of what you were saying for the town itself, that village can get incorporated into that.
So are you suggesting rather than...
Is that possible?
I think anything's possible. And I guess what I'm wondering is, do you have a location where you think would be appropriate for that kind of information?
I'm sure I can find one. I hadn't given it too much thought. It's just that I think it's vitally important that the layout of the town is discussed. And
you've just broken up, Jan. Jan, are you still there? We seem to have lost your audio. So we might try coming back to you shortly. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask something.
Yes, go ahead, Gay.
Talking about the differentiation between the Macquarie towns and the rest of the LGA, it seemed to me, I'll backtrack a little bit. I have a graphic design background and I know how much work gets put into these things. And I know that often a lot of our design elements are not appreciated or even seen by the public. So I was looking at the differentiation between the Bligh Park and the Richmond examples. And it seemed to me that if you are trying to differentiate between the 5 Macquarie towns and the rest of the LGA, the public isn't going to see that difference. To me, it's fairly subtle in what you are presenting.
Yeah, it is. I agree. It is a subtle difference. But we had used the corporate fonts, the branding fonts from the council, and it felt that it wasn't heritage enough, and it just needed a little bit of something subtle to make it more, giving it a little bit more heritage feel and a nod to the heritage. And the font was one element that came up in the council meetings, and so we had a look at that, and we were happy. We thought that it did pay a bit more respect to the heritage look and feel, even though it is only a small thing. And we couldn't design 2 separate signage suites. Our scope of works was to design one signage suite, but we tried to accommodate by just through texture and a small change to to create a subtle point of difference. It is a subtle point of difference, but I think it'll work well. I
I love the design for the Macquarie towns. I'm just not sure that the public is even going to appreciate there's a difference.
That's okay. Well, it'll, I think once you see it all in context in that town, it'll feel right. And the next town you go to, at least there's a connection there. And, you know, maybe you're more aware, like you said, you have that visual background.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Graham, and then Michelle, and then Erin.
Yes, Madam Chair. Look, just keeping on what Gay was just talking about, the subtlety of identifying the Macquarie towns. Why don't we just use the words Macquarie town? You know, where we've got Richmond or Windsor or whatever, then I think it needs to be reinforced because we are not hiding that. We're actually wanting to promote it, or what really the council is wanting to. So let's not hide it. Let's flaunt it, so to speak, and let's bring it to the fore. And I'm sure that can be included within the signage in a way that's acceptable. I guess just staying with the sandstone signage, if I could, and I guess this may well be to Helen. You talked about the sandstone supply. I guess I would like to encourage that the sandstone actually comes from the Hawkesbury. We do have two good quarries out here at East Currajong, and I'm sure they could provide the required sandstone. And I don't know whether that's your intention, but
yes,
I'd really like to put that up.
Absolutely, that's our intention, and we have got samples approved from those quarries to use.
And that was certainly something that came out of the council's discussions.
Yeah,
that it should be a local.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's really lovely. We've had samples approved of that, or supplied to Amanda.
I've got a couple more questions if I can. Had you anticipated that the town signage would be at the entrance to a town as well as within the town, so that people know where they're entering?
There is a separate sign type, which is in a different scope, which is a welcome to the Hawkesbury region. And I do believe those sign types will be utilised on the perimeters of the towns. So it's more of a council branded welcome to the Hawkesbury LGA, which isn't part of this sort of scope. This is more about, I suppose, visitors and general wayfinding.
Okay, the other question I had was, had you considered the location that we call Richmond Hill, which is very close to St John of God, as being a prominent location for signage, being the place where I guess the first explorers that came up the river got off the boat, as I understand it, at Richmond Hill. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jan Barkley Jack, but I think it's that sort of prominence that needs to be brought forward as well.
We can look into that location.
Thank you.
I think, Jan, didn't you have a strong opinion about Richmond Hill in relation to the Richmond content? I just remember having a conversation with you about Richmond Hill.
Jan, have we got you back? Still can't hear Jan, and she doesn't appear to be on mute. So I think we've had some sort of audio breakdown there. We might flag that for a question that we give to Jan.
Yeah, look, Richmond Hill, just in response to that, was on the list of content. It's just physically outside of the area that was defined as having town signage. I don't know, Helen, if you wanted to talk about the geographic boundaries of where these signs were meant to go.
Well, the first focus is on Windsor, and we will be looking at Richmond as well. But I think that's something maybe we can come back to you on. But yeah, we can look into that.
I guess my only other question, Madam Chair.
Pushing your luck, Graham.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was in regard to Richmond, and it seems to me that Richmond seems to be the poor cousin to Windsor when it comes to this signage.
Can I answer to you there? We're actually we're doing our first rollout. We'll be in Richmond. and then Windsor will come as well. So, well, the wayfinding, that is. So the wayfinding, we're actually prototyping all the sign types in Richmond first. So I think Richmond will get a lift soon.
Not so poor after all. Michelle and then Erin.
I'll just be quick. I presume that you're following a trail, so that's perhaps why the courthouse has been omitted, because you're concentrating on a particular route down to the railway station. But if so, I think that you should, if you can include something about the Catholic, either via the cemetery or the church, because it isn't the oldest, but it is one of the oldest Catholic cemeteries. And the other thing is, like, the railway station, I don't think you mentioned about like transport and that shift away from the river down, like with the railway transport. And my third comment, and also like the local government aspect, you know, when the council, not that we're a historic building, but we're here.
Just dated, not historic.
But also my other comment is, with my photography hat, is that we need signage, and I would encourage that. But also we have to bear in mind that a lot of these things that we're going to mark are beautiful vistas and scenes, and then we're going to have big signs in front of them. Thompson Square is a really good example, that there's so many things in it, and it's this tiny little space, and everything's trying to, you know, get in your face. So I just think that if with some of this signage, it should be very low key and subtle, very subtle, not because, you know, if you want to look at a historic building and then you've got 5 big signs in front of it, you can't see the vista. So that's just
I couldn't agree with you more. It's we don't want to, you know, ruin the beautiful vista. We don't want to, you know, take away from the heritage at all. So firstly, we've got the blue plaques. They're actually not that big, and they're quite discreet. And our aim is to have a QR code which links to further information. So with the blue plaques, we're actually quite limited with the amount of information you can get on that. It's basic. So-and-so lived here from this date to this date. It's really quite limited. And then we've got the small plinths. They're only sort of about waist height. And again, it's enough information to give you a snapshot and an introduction. Again, we've got a QR code to link to websites for further information, because you know, the stories are quite in depth. So we have a short version for the sign, and then we have the longer version on the website. But I couldn't agree with you more. We don't want to clutter anything up with signs everywhere.
Thanks, Erin.
Okay, so thank you, Helen. Thank you, Kate. Some of my questions have already been asked and answered, which is great. Was the wayfinding done in conjunction with the town revitalisation project, or was that completely separate?
No, it was done in conjunction. We've been working closely with the project team there to make sure whatever we did complemented and where we placed things as well. We worked in, and they were quite aware. We've had quite a few meetings with the architect and team.
Okay. The only other question I had is, in the document you had the Indigenous naming on your wayfinding. Will that be dual on one signage, or will that have its own signage? Because I think it needs to be one against each other. Like,
it can be two-sided, and we're directed by the council on how that is included, but that has come up in conversations about having dual.
Yeah. Thank you.
So do you have a preference?
I would really like it to be dual, so that we understand both sides of history. and the heritage that's attached to those places. If my preference, I would really love to have the Long Lake language first. But as long as it is an equal opportunity to have both signed, yeah.
Yeah, look, it's double-sided, like the freestanding plinths are double-sided, so there is definitely that opportunity to do that.
So you would have the English on one side and the Durug on the other.
Yeah, I would rather than be on the same safe. Yeah. Because you're not taking anyone to be.
It's educational.
It's about education. What's to say that someone's not going to walk around the other side of the plinth to see the other, whatever language is on the other side, whether it be English or Durug. I'd like them to be equally visible at the same time.
I
Yeah,
agree.
it's about placing it that they're both visible
together.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
can.
so that they're not separated, not one on one side and one on the other side. I think they need to be side by side.
Oh, okay.
So if, for example, you used, so we're talking about place names. We're not talking about a direct translation of the word, of the rest of the words that are necessary.
No. We're talking about landmark, like placeholding.
Place names.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Look, I'm happy to review our designs and see how we can include that.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we've got good examples internationally of how that's done. Ireland, Wales, both really effective at getting dual language on signs.
Go down South Coast, the whole way along those major roads. You've got dual naming.
And I think it's important that one isn't subservient to the other.
No, that's fine.
I think that we did raise that. I mean, I know I raised that in the council meeting, and I think that I think, as Michelle said, it's the real value of education around seeing them together. If we want to restore the language and have people embracing it, I think it's a really important priority, actually, particularly the place names, so that people learn to, when something's referred to, that means Windsor or that means whatever.
Yeah, I think it's got huge education potential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just press your button, Cindy, and then I'll go to Cindy and then to Michael.
Did you, Michael, want to go?
No, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay. Being the proud Burrabaronga woman and walking in the footsteps of my ancestors for 60,000 years, I'm also a descendant of Matthew Everingham, so I'm quite proud of the history of Windsor itself, being able to walk in his footsteps as he's would have walked along these streets. But that's not what I wanted to say. But my question was, the word dark and young needs to be clarified. It's the ending of that word is pronounced ong, and it's a huge marriage songline that goes from dark and young to Yuan country, where you married into their mob. And I just think that word needs clarification before any writings are done on it.
That sounds really interesting. I would love to offer that as a piece of signage amongst the Darug history. Is there a reference or source you could send me, or I could talk to you directly?
I'm not sure if there's a reference, because that's a handed down story. There's lots of dark and young who talk about that as well. It's just because we've become lazy speakers, we don't say the ong anymore. And because Dark and Young Land Council, we've been saying Dark and Young Land Council for so many years, you just forget to say the ong. But it's really important to keep that ong on there, because it goes to Wollongong, it's Terrygong, Jerrygong, all those words that end in ong are an actual bloodline, songline, map line, however we want to put it.
Thanks, Cindy. That's really interesting.
That is really interesting.
I'll go to Michael and then to Erin. Oh, you don't? Oh, you were waving at me.
Through you, Madam Chair, just a couple of questions and comments for Helen and Kate. Michelle mentioned considering an additional theme of the railway, and I've just thought about the Hawkesbury thematic study, which would be a useful document to reference, which might give some guidance on other themes and other items that could be considered. My second point, which is a question, is in relation to the use of QR codes and how future-proof and resilient they are for making sure that interpretive signage is not time and technology sensitive. And my third point that I just wanted to ask is, have you got an implementation plan for this strategy in terms of ongoing maintenance and monitoring the condition of the signage to make sure that text remains legible and images are not faded? And is there a maintenance cost for council in making sure that these are relevant and maintained?
Okay, I'll just speak to that last item about the maintenance. So all the signage will have an anti-graffiti coating on them. And basically it will be like vinyl applied with anti-graffiti coating. We use it throughout a lot of sites. We've been doing signage for many years. It's a standard practice. And there's a digital print for the maps so they can be updated. We've designed it so there's two panels, so we can take one panel off and replace it if things change and need updating. So, you know, they'll be very durable and easy to maintain. Going back to the previous question, item 2, which was, I'll address that as well.
The QR codes and the
QR codes. Yeah, I agree with you. Technology changes rapidly. So it is aimed that they are temporary. They can be taken on and off. So I agree with you, because technology changes so quickly that, you know, in 5 years' time, it might be something completely different. So it is something that we can remove from the signs. That was something that we had discussed that. And the train station, I think that's definitely something we should explore. And Kate?
Are you talking about Helen Proudfoot's heritage work? Is that the report you're talking about? Sorry.
Yes. Andrew might be able to
It's online.
remind me of the author of that. It was only published recently. It's available via council's website.
Okay.
It was actually written in the 1980s.
It was. We sat on it
And
for
poor
a couple
Helen
of
passed
decades.
away before it was passed, but it was sort of revised by some council staff, and it's on the council's website.
It's a very good heritage report, and I understand it was endorsed as still being accurate even after its original publication 20 years ago. So that's a real testament to the amount of work that she put in. And I agree, she did cover the importance of the train station and the difference it made to transportation of goods from the Hawkesbury agricultural region up into the Sydney city. So absolutely, I can include the train station in the list of content. Yep.
Graham, is that you hovering over a microphone?
I was going to mention something about perhaps the legacy of content online and whether or not perhaps utilising the council website to hold the content for the QR codes, and that would at least potentially future-proof the content because it would be within the council service.
Yeah. Yep. That was the plan.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Graham?
Yeah, thank you. Just further on the thematic history, I think Terry Cass actually reviewed Helen Proudfoot's work in some years later, so it might be worthwhile actually having a look at that document as well as Helen's to give you more updated work. But there's also, as part of the heritage study, which we haven't got to yet, I understand that there has been a review of the thematic history there, and I don't know whether Chris would share any information on the upgrade of that, whether it's worthwhile the consultants considering that in this, and I guess I have one other question, Madam Chair, before he answers that. And I was going to ask who's actually signing off on the content of all of this work that you're doing.
So I think council's intention was that the Heritage Committee look at the content and just check it for suitability and accuracy before council signed off on it finally. I think I'm remembering that correctly. Yep. So before Christopher finishes up, I will say if you've got now you've had a chance to have a further look at all of this stuff. If you've got further comments or considerations that you've thought of, if you could send those through via Andrew's email address, or you can send it to me and I'll pass it on. And we'll basically circulate a committee email link that can reach everybody. I think is probably the easiest way forward. We've used that in the past. If you've got other things that you want to send through, please do. Christopher, do you want to answer that?
Madam Chair, through Madam Chair. Yeah, Graham, it does form part of the brief and of that study of that Hawkesbury Community Heritage Study. A thematic history with some particular focuses forms part of that work.
Any more?
So I guess my question on that, Madam Chair, is it worth the consultants actually looking at that particular work that's been updated?
I'm sorry, are you talking about Helen Proudfoot's work being updated with the additional appendix at the end? Is that the part that you're talking about?
I'm talking about council's actually undertaking now a review. Well, they call it a review of the heritage study, and it's a community-based heritage study, which the consultants are revising the thematic history, as I understand it. And I just wondered whether you should actually be looking at that as an update.
Who would like to answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So obviously mindful, and it's obviously the subject of the next item on discussion for the committee, is obviously that project is an ongoing project. Obviously the Wayfinding project is here and now, and so I guess it's the known knowns in terms of what we have there. So mindful that our heritage study is that ongoing project, that it hasn't reached completion yet. So I guess in terms of the wayfinding, they've moved forward with the available information that they have at the current time. Yeah.
And can
go ahead? Was that Kate? Oh, Cheryl. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
I don't know where. I can't pick where it's coming from.
If I could just before I mentioned the courthouse, the police fort or whatever it's called, and the cemetery down by the river, I understand that this is a heritage trail. However, these things might be kind of a little outside of the trail, but then Tebbets is quite a way over in that direction. So I think it would be really good if they could be considered also to be part of it.
My understanding, the problem with the cemetery is access.
I understand the access. Yeah, I'm understanding that.
Council can't send people to somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, but the police fort, or for want of a better name, and the barracks and the courthouse are certainly accessible.
Yes, on the peninsula.
Yeah.
Yes. We're going to have to move on from this item because we're running out of time. We've still got 3 items to.
Danielle.
Yes, Jan, you're back.
Danielle, can you hear me?
I can.
I'm back. Terrific.
Back.
I just wanted to say on that, council knows this, but the old cemetery signage is located on the wrong site.
Yes.
So you need to be aware of that, and it will need to be on the adjacent site.
Yes, thanks, Jan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to finish saying was just quickly that the information that I have done on the towns, village rather before the towns, I will give to Andrew and he can send it out to the committee. And Kate, I'm not sure if I got it to you or not, so I will send it again to you.
Thanks, Jan. That's
Thank you.
helpful. Kate and Helen, thank you very much for joining us and going through all of that and answering all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we don't need a resolution from that. I don't think that the point of that was to get everyone's feedback, and we have. So we can now move on to item 4, which is the update on the preparation of the Hawkesbury community-based heritage study. Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the report is basically.
Oh, sorry, Andrew. I'm just going to pause you. I've got a conflict of interest in this item, and it's a pecuniary interest. So I'm not going to leave the discussion, but I will step down as chair. So could I have someone put themselves up to chair?
Can I suggest Michael?
Sorry. Way you go, Michael. He's fine to chair from there. We don't need to play musical chairs.
That's fine. Yeah. So report's been prepared to provide an update to the committee regarding preparation of the local government-wide heritage study. It's an ongoing project, and also seeking to form a working group of the Heritage Committee to assist and advise council on completion of the study. So the study originally commenced in 2019. It was subject to a grant that the council received for part of the funding of the study. It's essentially an LGA-wide study to basically consider the existing listings and potential new listings, including preparation of inventory sheets. There was a working group of the previous committee was formed to provide advice and input into the process, and particularly to help identify potential new listings. So that working group met on a number of occasions, and they provided valuable input into the project. And there was, I guess, particular interest from that working group in more looking at the rural locations for potential new listings as part of the project. However, early in 2020, the project was significantly impacted by the commencement of the COVID pandemic. And then I guess highlighting, obviously, I mentioned earlier in the meeting, in late 2021, after continual efforts to achieve a full-time dedicated resource to heritage, we had a lot of impetus from this particular committee to get that full-time resource, and we'll obviously have Christopher Reeves with us now in that role. So Christopher started in late 2021, and a lot of his work has been sort of understanding the context of the Hawkesbury and the various works that are required in terms of heritage. Also started a process to meet with various heritage representative groups, basically, to fully understand the priorities and the size of the task ahead. So I guess the completion of the study is a key project for Christopher and for my section to move forward. And I guess having that full-time dedicated resource actually allows us to have more active project management of the project than was necessarily previously the case. So the report outlines the various phases that have been undertaken to date, and obviously the further steps and phases that are needed to complete the project. So in terms of completed parts of the studies, is obviously the documentation review and revised thematic history, inspection of existing listed items and some of the potential new items. Obviously, in terms of needing to finalise finalise those inspections of the potential sites and completion of the various inventory sheets, and then the actual final report. As part of the work that we have undertaken to date, is I guess identified the need for further investigation and work associated with slab barns in particular. I guess in looking at some of the really key heritage elements for the Hawkesbury, it's obviously our Aboriginal cultural heritage. It's the slab barns and early colonial period as well that are really, I guess, some of those standout items that really do provide the identity and character of the Hawkesbury. The floods have highlighted the recent floods that we've had, 5 in the last 2.5 years and 4 large floods within the last 14, 16 months in particular has highlighted the risk that the slab barns in particular are at, and I guess the need to consider listings of those items, not only to protect them in a statutory sense, but also to provide those particular property owners with the ability to source funding opportunities that exist by virtue of having an item listed. So the report also outlines, the work that was previously undertaken in terms of slab barns, and I guess what we think needs to happen to move that work forward, and including preparation of inventory sheets for those potential slab barn items. So essentially, the recommendation is obviously to update the committee and seek the formation of a new working group to advance the heritage study work. And yeah, so that's the recommendation. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Can I ask, does council have a time frame for the next steps in moving forward with this?
Oh, look, we're continuing to move forward immediately. We need the project to continue, and because we really do want to reach finalisation of this particular project. It's I guess the importance of this particular project can't be understated, and we do fully appreciate that. So the idea is to move it forward and to reach finalisation as soon as we practically can. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Are there any comments or questions on that?
Yes.
My conflict stems from I have a slab barn on my property, and my entire property isn't listed, and I'm hoping that the slab barn is a significant trigger to get it listed. But it would normally fall within the bulk of there are 3 heritage items on the site, and the slab barn is one of them. I guess given that we've got a set of inventory sheets already from the slab barn study, is it possible to do a quick check of what we've already got the information for as the first phase, and then add those items that we don't have sufficient information for listing in basically around 2, and then follow up with the rest of the items that we've been attempting to add through the much larger community heritage study. I'm just concerned that if we wait to do it as a job lot at the end, it's a very, very large body of work, and it's taking a really long time. And in the meantime, we've got enough information, I think, to put protection on some of these items that we're losing. We've got that one that's falling, it looks like it's falling into the river at Freeman's Reach. We have the other one on Wilberforce Road that was put through a chipper, despite council telling the owner to stop work repeatedly. So we're running out of time, I think. Not only is it stopping the well-intentioned owners from getting assistance to do the right thing, it's allowing people who aren't going to do the right thing to get away with it. And it also means too that when an item comes to us, and we've had this happen recently with a property in New Street in Windsor, where council decided to put an interim heritage order on the property. It was incredibly expensive for a single item to put an interim order on. And if we don't get some of these items listed quickly, that's all we've got left with as a mechanism. So is it possible that we break this into 3 bits and get a bit of a jump on some of it?
Through Mr. Chair, I'll just respond to that. I think me coming on board, and I want to thank the committee that I'm actually physically here with you, that all of your efforts for me to be here. I think this hiatus that there's been with COVID, there's an opportunity for us to review what's on the table at the moment and to say, do we need to more change what we've currently got or what we're planning to do, and to amend our priorities. But I envisage that would occur through the working group, saying, look, and we say to the working group, this is what's on the table at the moment. This is what was agreed to back in 2018. Are we happy with the way it's progressed? Are we happy with the way it's heading in its last stages? This other study that we've put out a brief for the slab barns, are we happy with its, how we've said 6 months for that work to occur? Are we happy with that? Do we want to section it off in parts that we already have information? I think it's on the table for discussion with our working group.
Okay, thank you. So would that then form a recommendation to the working group to look at that prioritised approach to the listings, or is that something that council is going to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I had some comments here. Sorry. I've gone blank. I was explaining I was brain dead before I walked into the meeting. I'm even more brain dead now. Well, we have the recommendation before us to form a working group of this committee. Do we call for nominations for that?
That's what I'd expect, Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay. Is there any other discussion before we?
Yeah, Michael, I'd like something to say here. I guess being a long-time practitioner of heritage conservation, I'm really disappointed and somewhat disgusted that this is probably the third or fourth attempt that Hawkesbury City Council have actually made to get a heritage study off the ground and complete, and it's never happened. Something's gone wrong every time, and this is really the last straw, I believe. And I don't know whether it's a problem with the management of the process, or whether it's the consultants, or whether it's council not wanting to progress heritage. I don't know, but there's certainly some sort of background there that's not letting things happen the way they should happen. And I guess as a community-based heritage study, and you and I have both done them, there is quite a strict process. There's 20 points. And if you actually look at the summary of the process, which is, from the OEH, there's 20 distinct steps that one needs to take. And we're not even halfway there. I get the point that it's been reported that we've achieved 3 of the steps. And I guess that's why I was questioning in the last item whether the heritage thematic history could actually be divulged, because it says here that that's been done and we've paid for it. So I guess I would have thought that that was able to be. I know that the project's not finished. We haven't seen it necessarily, or whether it's been accepted by council or not, I don't know. But if it's a later review and it's got some stuff in it that's worthy for the wayfinding thing, then I would have thought it's a no-brainer to actually include it. But apart from that, I think the process, as I said, I'm really disappointed with the process, the way it's happened with this particular consultant. And I just didn't know whether council's continuing with this consultant or whether they're looking further afield, whether it's too far down the track, whether it's going to cost council money, whether it's going to cost the consultant money. I don't know, but we don't have that information to make that sort of judgment, or for council to make that sort of judgment, or we can't make that judgment on behalf of council because we don't have the information. And I guess if they've already been paid for 3 phases of the work, this committee hasn't seen anything. And I guess we've provided quite a lot of information to lead this particular group, yet we've never formally met with them. And that's part of the process. You're getting to step 3 or 4 of the summary of the process that the OEH requires. And we're supposed to have met with them at least a few times, and they're supposed to have reported back, I think, weekly on their progress. And I don't know whether that's happened or not. But so I guess, Christopher, if I could go through the chair to Christopher, where are we at with all of this, please?
Mr. Chair, what I envisage, and this is a difficult forum to do it, to probably best present a PowerPoint or detailed information to the working group to explain all the intricacies. I've spent countless hours working through. Sorry. I've been working through countless hours because I wasn't involved in the original project. I've come late, as you're aware. I've worked through what was the original brief, what was the agreed position with the consultants, what is the proper steps for a community heritage study, which I've been involved with as well as yourselves. How did the acceptance of the brief document from the consultants line up with those steps? So and just to tell you briefly, there were 7 steps from the consultants that were accepted in the final documentation. So these are all the details that I envisage I will go through with the working group, and we can make whatever tough decisions we might have to make at that time, but it has to be informed, tough decisions. And in my head, I've worked through all the issues, but I'd like to impart that to the working group, and then together we can work the way forward. Now, it's been identified that the slab barns didn't have sufficient coverage in the heritage study to date, and immediately we've worked on putting a brief out for that component. So there are works in progress to fix up what was, I believe, an omission in the original work. But these are the issues that we need to work through as a working group and sort out what is the way forward. I don't want to see another heritage study, as you were mentioning, Graham, go by the wayside, but we need to have it, make sure it lines up with our current heritage management objectives. And I've come on board to understand what those objectives are. I've had the benefit of working here previously as a consultant, so I've had some understanding of the area, but it is nothing compared to when you're sitting in the seat as a council employee. The amount of information coming across your desk, as even tonight, which I'm very grateful for, understanding more on Indigenous heritage as well. So there is, some discussions to be had, and they're best done in a working group with additional detailed information.
Thank you. So if I can just ask a couple of questions then, have the consultants that were engaged delivered on what they were given in the brief to deliver to date?
They've delivered on various stages. There's still a number of stages that are outstanding that we need to complete. Yeah.
Okay, so is council's intention to proceed with the existing consultants or look at a different consultant to complete the remaining sections that are yet to be done?
I guess, considering options, nothing is off the table in that regard, but obviously preference would be to finalise the existing study under current arrangements, but to a standard that is going to be acceptable to both council, the committee and the community. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And my last question to you, Christopher, is in relation to the working group. Would that working group be able to see a copy of the work that has been produced to date to be able to comment and provide further input?
I would think so, absolutely.
Is there any other discussion? Any questions?
I guess, Chairman, my answer to the last question was I would expect that we would, because that's actually within the process of a community-based heritage study, that the information comes back to the community, comes back to those that have been appointed to actually see this through on behalf of council. So that I would have thought that we need to be open and transparent with what's transpired and what information has been accepted to date.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there's no further discussion, is there any online?
Michael, can I say something, please?
Certainly.
I I am not a member of the working party for this, but I would like to be. Is it possible that I can join?
Yes.
Yes, we heard parts of that, but we understood the gist was that you were wanting to nominate to be on that working group. Is that correct? We'll take that as being correct.
Maybe she could put it in the chat.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Are there any, do we nominate for that committee? What we do? Yes. Okay. Are there any nominations for that working group? Graham, Michelle? Thank you. Myself. Do we need to second that or
No? Well, I think you can put up a motion that that those people form a working group to expedite the community heritage study.
And do I put that motion up, Madam?
And so can you just read out the names then for the tape, and so that the minute secretary's got those?
Yes, so it was Deborah Hallen, it was Graham Edds, Michelle Nichols and Michael Edwards, and Jan Barclay-Jack.
Barclay-Jack. Do you want a councillor on that as well, Christopher?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering if it would be prudent to actually have at least one councillor on that committee as well.
I'll tag along as chair, but keep in mind I've got a conflict that I'll have to manage.
Noted. Okay, do we need to do anything else with that?
Just make sure everyone's in favour. You need a mover. You need a mover and a seconder.
Okay, can we have a mover
and make
for
sure
that?
everyone's in favour.
Graham Edds, a seconder. Deborah Hallen, and all of those in favour. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the only other thing I'd like to ask is that we actually nominate a time to meet, and it should be fairly soon, I would hope.
Indeed. Perhaps I could put that to council to propose times of availability and present that to.
Yeah, we'll come back to those working group members with options in terms of days and times. And yeah, definitely want to have the first meeting of that as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Can I also suggest that you can use the library study rooms if you need to have a place other than the council to meet?
That's a good idea.
Thank you. I'll hand back to Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, could I apologise, please? I have to leave. I have another meeting.
Sure.
So thank you. Nice to meet on the committee. I'll see you.
Thanks, Michael. And enjoy your next meeting, Mary. So we're at 6:45 and we've got 2 items to go, and the item 6 is a composite item with lots of things in it. So I'm warning you that if you are not brief, you will have to stay in. So item 5, the Local Heritage Assistance Fund, which is always a nice story.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I declared a pecuniary interest, so I need to leave.
No, I don't.
No?
Do you need? I don't think you need to leave. I just think you need to just be mindful
Remain
of
silent.
the conflict that you have, and the same for you, Michelle. So we've got 2 conflicts on item 5. Christopher.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I can say the program is completed, so perhaps that helps with the conflict. Just very briefly, we had, so our Local Heritage Assistance Fund for 2021-2022 was related to providing assistance to local heritage item owners with their maintenance and conservation works. They tended to be small works that didn't require a development application. We were to expedite the matters. We had 27 original applications. 25 of those were accepted by a panel from council staff and council's consultant heritage advisor. So I came on board late last year. Things seem to be kicking along all right, and then we got hit with COVID, floods, whole range of other items, which were causing a lot of the items to perhaps not be completed. Irrespective of those issues, we ended up with 18 completions. We managed to get an extension from Heritage New South Wales for our acquittal form till the end of July. But we ended up getting 18 completions out of those 25. So in percentage terms, 28% failed to complete, but 72% completed. What's most remarkable, and this is the good news story, is for councils and the Heritage New South Wales investment, we had a 59.82% increase on last year's on the ground completions, which is quite remarkable given the constraints that we had during that period. So just for example, last year, $63,545 worth of works were completed, the total value of them. We had $106,000 worth of work completed during this very difficult period, which is quite remarkable. And that was for a council's contribution of roughly $22,000 and the Heritage New South Wales contribution of $5,500. So the point of this report is not only the good news story, but to ask the committee if they have any suggestions for this coming year, because we're doing the paperwork as we speak for this upcoming year as well. So if the committee's got any suggestions, which have obviously been useful for previous years, that's it.
So when Christopher refers to suggestions, in the past we've done themed rounds. So in order to target potentially neglected areas. So shortly after the slab barn study was published, we had a round that prioritised funding for repair of and works on slab barns. It doesn't mean that all the money in that round necessarily goes to those items, but it does prioritise them. We did a year of, I think, shop or commercial building improvements, which was a spectacular fizzer. Hardly anybody replied in that round. And there's a whole lot of reasons why we don't often get applications. Council does dollar for dollar funding. For people who aren't aware of this program previously, Council does a dollar for dollar contribution. That doesn't mean that if you're spending 20,000, Council's going to give you 20,000. It's capped. I think it's capped at 2,000. $2,000 doesn't go very far. You'll be surprised to learn. So a lot of people were, while they're happy to get the 2,000, still have significant financial constraints on spending a lot of money. So it's a facilitation rather than a really big push. You do have to be heritage listed to apply for the funds, and this is it's something that we can use as a bit of a carrot for selling the idea of the heritage listing to people who aren't listed yet. It's one of the reasons why we push the advertising around the program and around the completion of the project, so that people do realise that there is something in it for them. It also means that you get lots of free consultation with a heritage expert, which is really helpful, and it's really grown in popularity. So I think when I started on council in 2016, we were literally dragging people in off the streets to listen to the presentation on the Heritage Assistance Fund. Now we're oversubscribed, which is terrific. So, so despite COVID getting in the way yet again, you did answer one of my questions, Christopher, which was how much the state government kicks in through the Heritage Office. It's the whopping sum, just in case anyone missed it, of $5,500. Woofed, knock yourselves out. We have pointed out to them that in an area as rich in heritage as the Hawkesbury, they might open their wallets a little more. No answer has been their stern reply thus far. But should you ever be talking to someone in the state sphere, you could perhaps suggest that the Hawkesbury could do with a bit more dosh, because at the moment we get about the same as, you know, as another council like Blacktown, you know, and I'm not running Blacktown down, but they don't have the same, they're not as rich in heritage items as we are. It would be nice if we got a bit more. Council, there's also been requests to council to increase the amount of money that council puts in to that fund, and no answer has been the stern reply there for a while as well. We live in hope, but certainly worth asking should you feel the urge. Because again, we will go into budget deliberations. Questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I have a comment, and it comes from, I guess, the last couple of rounds of this particular scheme, and recipients have always said to me, there's a heck of a lot of paperwork and things to do for a very small amount of money. And I guess I take that on board because some years ago I was the recipient of a very small grant too, and there is a lot of work to do for a very small amount. So it is difficult, and I guess, yes, I'd like to think that the purses might open up a little bit more to individual items.
Yeah, sure.
So for an applicant, at this stage, they only need one quote, I believe, and photographs of the work, and to fill out probably a reasonable amount of information. At the back end, we were required by the department to do countless hours of reporting. So that's the downside of which is the hidden side. They asked me to estimate how many hours we put into this program. I said hundreds of hours. I cannot tell you the amount of hours that it takes to for our $5,500 from the department. We work hard for it.
Yes, Madam Chair, just one other thing. I think the most important thing that comes out of this particular program is that the people need to do the job right and with excellence, so that they actually get paid and it's worthy of the work that is being done and the amount of money that's being paid. And I guess that has been a criticism in some years back, where the works weren't inspected as diligently as they ought to have been. And I guess in a few instances, I'm aware that, barns in particular have now disintegrated, fallen away, because they might have replaced a piece of timber or whatever, but they didn't do anything about the termites that were already there and nobbling away. So that there is a reasonable amount of inspection that needs to be done. And as Christopher says, that takes time.
Mm. And I think each of these projects gets a visit from the Heritage Advisor to go through 2 visits to go through what they should be doing, because often some of it, the tendency is to beautify rather than to protect, and you really can put you can be painting something that doesn't have much substance underneath it, and that's what we're trying to guard against. A big component of this, I think, is education, and that's probably the major power of this program is educating. In years past, Otto Sahami, Council's Heritage Advisor, ran an information evening and he would pick 2 or 3 things to talk about: roofing materials, for example, or the right windows, or the right paint, and use that opportunity to educate people. Are we looking to do that again with this scheme, with this round?
Well, I guess the last probably 2 and a bit years, we've obviously been hampered by the current COVID pandemic. So yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously previous years we always used to run that, and it is a good educational opportunity, both in terms of the program, but also techniques in terms of heritage. So yeah, we can sort of take that offline and think about whether we run a similar session now that we're able to have more face-to-face meetings.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, through Madam Chair. So Otto actually does that on each site we visit, and we're willing to morph the application they've done and twist it a little bit around to make sure it's best practice. So that occurs on each site that we attend as well. So even if they've submitted an application, there might be minor modifications to that or changes to that to make sure it is best practice.
Great, thanks. Any further? So I think, are we looking for recommendations for priorities for this round, or?
Well, I guess highlight that previous years there were specific themes, but the last 2 years we've had no theme, and it's been just open to the whole LGA, which I think that's probably worked quite well in terms of getting the increase in applications and actual people undertaking works. So I guess from my side of things, I think we'd prefer to still offer it on a whole LGA wide basis rather than a specific theme. So I guess the purpose of the report was obviously to outline the achievements from this year's program, but also if there was any particular ideas to improve the program for next year. So as Christopher's highlighted, we're close to being able to release this current year's program. So we've included the forms that we had for last year. So I think those forms are still relevant, or if there's any improvements to those forms. Obviously, there's been a lot of recommendations from the committee previously about a lot more advertising and promotion, and you can probably see some. We've included as one of the attachments some magazine articles that have been produced to outline the achievements of the program. So I guess anything like that. So in terms of improvements to say the forms or how we actually operate the program. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Any further comments? So the recommendation that we've got is that we note the outcome of Heritage Assistance Program and provide advice to council. So I think we'll take on board that people do see that there is a significant amount of paperwork involved. I don't know that we can cut much of that back. I think we'll take that on board, but we also need to maintain the integrity of the program and meet our funding obligations. Might I suggest that you point out that more money would be helpful? If someone could move the recommendation. Graham, and a seconder, Shane. Thanks. Is everyone in favour? Good. Thank you. We did get some good publicity out of that round, which was very nice. And you can see the paperwork, the initial paperwork is in the document. Right, item 6, update on various heritage related matters, which I think is a sneaky way of squeezing about 6 things onto the business paper all at once. But that's okay. So the first up is Singleton's Mill and the State Heritage listing.
The latest advice we have, and obviously the committee's been heavily involved in making this happen, the latest advice we have from our representative in Heritage New South Wales is the documents before the minister, the planning minister, and they've almost got their pen there to sign it. So it's that imminent.
So that's been a huge amount of work to get there. And I want to note the work of Steve Rawlins from the previous Heritage Advisory Committee, who he did a lot of the background and legwork involved in that.
Madam Chair, we also have to acknowledge Erin's assistance in the matter. I walked along the creek with her and as part of a team from Heritage New South Wales. So yes, I'd like to acknowledge that as well.
Great.
There's a lot of leeches.
Oh, nice. Nice. There's probably more leeches now. Lovely. So does that mean we've got a Durrag component into that listing as well?
Yes. There was a couple of sites that were rated and going on to be recorded. Don't like the microphone.
You have to have it, or if the meeting, the audience can't hear.
There was multiple sites that were found and either got recorded or are in the process of being recorded in various kinds of, so we found ochre quarries, we found scar trees, we found grinding grooves, and that was only within a small section of that study area. So the prospects of it is going to be huge.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good. So, and a much more complete listing as well, which is terrific. Shaw's Creek Aboriginal Place boundary extension.
Nothing else to report on that, Madam Chair, other than it's been notified to us. That's really it for that one.
Okay, any questions, comments? No? God, flying along. Oh, the mile marker replica installation. Right, who belongs to this?
It's on my to-do list, I'll admit to the committee. I do even have a nail that needs to go to be replicated, which I haven't got to yet. So it's on my head, and I hope by the time we meet again, I'll be able to say there's been more progress on that particular matter.
So this is a mile marker for those new to the committee. This is a mile marker that sat at East Richmond and disappeared. And it's really significant, and we're having a replica made. It's not the same as having the original, but it's, I suppose, better than Nout.
Okay, I'll just highlight that the actual replica has been manufactured. It's just waiting for installation, and the interpretive element that's going on top is to be finalised as well. Yeah,
including its special nail.
Yep.
Good. We await the reveal of the nail.
Just as a by the way, while we're on the subject of mile markers, there appears to be a sandstone one at Agnes Banks, which is slowly getting buried in the grass and the mud and regularly being collected by cars that run off the road. I noticed it's been chipped again, and it really needs to be looked at, examined, and have some sort of protective fence put around it before it gets completely shattered.
Could you send the location of that through?
Yes, I will
so that
do.
we can get someone out to look at it?
Can I add that that's included in that book on way markers that has been previously provided to council? If not, the library's got a copy, and it's included in there.
Shane?
Madam Chair, with the initial mile marker that went missing, was there any effort put to putting the word out to try and find it?
Yes. No joy. Michelle, you've got your light on. Okay, happy to move on. Okay, the Macquarie Town State Heritage Listing proposal. This will take a little bit longer. Christopher?
Yes, I've had initial discussions with one of our committee members about this matter, which I might let Graham talk to that himself. But basically what I was asked to do is contact the Heritage New South Wales to see whether they'd be accepting of previous resolutions of council to progress the Macquarie Town State listing. I apologise, I haven't got back to Graham on what they said verbally to me, but it was a bit of an ambivalent response, but they said if council supports it, that would help its position, and that council's already said their response. Their other words were, it would be a large job consulting a lot of people, so they're probably trying to steer us off the scent. And they also mentioned the difficulties that have been faced in the Mulgoa area about a landscape listing, but they didn't close the door. So I think from my perspective, I think it's a matter that could be progressed and should be progressed as per council's resolution, and for discussion at the committee.
Graham, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. Look, really, I put my hand up to actually forward this project, and I guess this was really in recognition of the huge amount of work that Ian Jack has done on getting the background of this during the bicentennial for 2010. That seems an awful long time ago, and we certainly did get support from OEH then, and it was a hot off the press thing, but council didn't support it at that particular time, but has subsequently, which we're very grateful for. But the bicentennial's over, so the impetus is really not quite there, and the importance of it is not quite there for that time.
The next one's coming up in 2030.
Well, I hope it doesn't take us that long, Michelle, but.
Sorry.
But even saying that, I think it's incredibly important that we actually acknowledge the planning of Macquarie in Australia, and this is what it's all about. And those sorts of planning is still readable in our town landscapes of our 4 towns and also at Castlereagh. And we still, as I understand it, have the approval from Penrith Council to forward Castlereagh as part of this particular proposal. And I guess the other thing that really should be mentioned, and you'd be very aware of it, Chris, this is not a listing of the buildings as such, but the town plan layout. So it's not stopping council doing repairs and maintenance as they would need to do on various things. It's to acknowledge the planning of Macquarie in the layout of the towns. So that's really an important part of it. And that's something that, we were waiting on further information, I think, from you, Chris, in respect of whether it would be 1 listing or whether it would be 5 listings. And that was something that I think you were going to come back to us about when you talked to OEH.
Madam Chair, they didn't actually give me that clarification. I apologise, I didn't get back to you, Graham, but yeah, I didn't get that clarification. So it's really, I suppose, up to us to decide what we're going to progress with.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think that this is a really important decision because it means a lesser amount of work or a far bigger amount of work if we're looking at 5 individual listings, or if we can actually lump them together. And that's something that perhaps a working group, if we can do that, I think Jan Barclay-Jack is quite happy to be a part of it. If you're listening, Jan, I think you might nod your head or something. But I'm pretty sure that Jan would be involved, and certainly Carol, my wife, and myself would be, and we welcome any other members of the committee if they'd like to join us in preparation of this document.
Thanks, Graham. Look, I think it's important at this point to say that that Macquarie's history isn't entirely clean in the Hawkesbury, and I want to acknowledge that that Macquarie was the author of a particularly hurtful and really damaging edict towards First Nations people in the Hawkesbury and beyond. And I think that we need to have that on the public record when we discuss his good works that he also did damage as well as part of a colonialist regime in Australia. I think the idea of the Macquarie Street Plan actually is something whose time has come. And I say that not because we're more aware of the heritage, but because what we are actually seeing at the moment is the genius of Macquarie telling the people who lived in this place to live off the floodplain. And if nothing else in the last 2 years, we have learnt that the bits that Macquarie said were okay were pretty jolly good. And the idea that you didn't leave all your stuff down on the lowlands, and you certainly didn't put your people and your houses down there, was a really good idea. What we've got is a beautiful historical plan for living with this floodplain. And our own hubris in the last 170 years has got us into lots of hot water ever since. If you look, I think when you look at the overlays of these maps, I didn't understand the place that I lived in until I looked at these. So and the way, particularly in Windsor, I think Windsor's probably the best example of how the topography affected the planning for that town, and how actually clever it is that you put people not just on the high ground, but that you build a livable town around it. And it's when we've deviated from Macquarie's plans that we've mucked things up. So the placement of the train station is a good example. We're now spending a small fortune linking the train station with the main end of town. Had someone paid attention to Macquarie's plan when they put the train station down there, or when they were planning the rail line, probably would have done something different. It's the same with development. Had we paid attention to Macquarie, we wouldn't be now talking about raising dam walls or how we evacuate people. So I think actually we need to, I think this is the time to go in hard on this, on these plans, as an example of some really solid town planning for this floodplain. Not just, given that they were there, that people had been, white people had been here for 30 years. And we understood that then. And, 220 years later, 240 years later, we are still struggling with this concept. I think this is something that actually we can probably get significant publicity for, which should drive our efforts to get this acknowledged. Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I say something?
You can, Jan, and then I'll go to Michael. Sorry, Michael.
I just want to get back to what I started to say before, and that is that the village is part of that Macquarie town, and that doesn't detract at all from it. It enhances it. And I'm really keen that we get that village looked at. I've been doing the research on it as part of my PhD, and I've got it all written out. And I really want that to be included in all this because it clarifies, and Macquarie himself acknowledged that that's what he was doing. So I'm very happy to help, and I support all that Graham said.
Great, thanks, Jan. Michael?
Hello.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Graham made the comment that the listings proposed to be the street layout, which is true, is correct. And the listing is effectively taking in public land. It's not private property. So I'm curious by, Christopher, your comment that Heritage New South Wales are trying to throw us off the scent, or council off the scent, by suggesting that public consultation will be a headache. What public consultation are they envisaging to take place? Because once a nomination is made, it is then put to the community for comment before the minister makes a decision. Two examples of streets that have been listed is the grid layout of Liverpool and that of Bathurst. And there may be lessons for council to learn in how they approach the listing of those towns and what their curtilages are and what their limitations are for listing.
Through Madam Chair, yes. I'd probably harsh for me to say they were trying to throw us off the scent. If I did say that, I didn't mean to, but I think their view was that it was going to be the whole landscape that was going to be, or the whole area was going to form part of the listing. So perhaps it is a very important point of clarification that we are only referring to the streets, which we could always get back to them on.
Yes, Madam Chair, just to clarify that, it's not just the layout, but it's the principle of having the central green space within the town and the layout around that. And that was really the crux of Macquarie's envisaged planning. Windsor is a little bit different to that because it actually had two green spaces, Thompson Square and Macquarie Park. So, but it also extended down, as lots of people don't know, down into South Windsor. And it was only the rail line that actually severed that some time later. And that's not fully understood, and it should be understood in the planning sense. So, yes, there are other implications, Chris, other things that need to be brought into the planning arrangement, but it's certainly not including the bricks and mortar of the buildings that are on the allotments that are around there. Yeah.
Can I just comment?
Yes, you may.
Like Graham was saying, that did extend down to South Windsor, and that's why South Windsor used to be called Newtown, because the railway line divided it, and that became part of the Newtown a new township. But it's a lot of those people on the lowlands had blocks given to them in South Windsor, but weren't actually taken up.
Is everyone aware of how Macquarie designed those towns? So that people who were farming on the lowland had land on the high points where they could retreat to. They could move their farm equipment and their crops, their stock if they needed to. But most specifically, they didn't live down in the damp bits. Something we have forgotten. So it looks like everyone is keen to proceed. So I think, shall we? Graham's made the suggestion that we form a working group to further that work. So far, we've got Graham and Jan on that working group. Do we have any other volunteers to participate in that?
Yes, please.
Michael? And once again, I shall tag along as chair. Excellent. So we shall continue our efforts with the Heritage Office. Worth noting that the Heritage Office refused to list the Australiana Pioneer Village for years and years until Jan and Ian managed to capture their attention with a snazzy video. And what was thought was going to be a 5-minute session ended up with a 45-minute session and a heritage listing. So there is always hope. Proposed Windsor Bridge Architects Working Group. Artifacts. I haven't got, guess who hasn't got their glasses on? Artifacts, not architects. Some of you are ready to be architects. No, I didn't say that out loud. Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So obviously highlighting that Transport for New South Wales as part of their various investigations and work on the Windsor Bridge replacement project, located a significant number of artifacts from the site. Those artifacts are with council now, and some of those are actually on display at the museum. But there's also a significant number of those artifacts are actually held in storage. I think there's in the order of 33,000 objects of varying levels of significance and varying size. So there's a need for advice to council in terms of what it does with those various artifacts, and so there's a call there for interested members of the committee to form a working group to advise council in terms of those artifacts. Yeah.
I think the Heritage Committee was provided with the previous Heritage Committee was provided with a bit of a stock take of those artifacts. It was very general, but is it possible to give this committee a bit of an idea of what we have? It could be sent out.
We can send out. Yeah. So I know
I
know the numbers, but yeah. No, definitely we can. Yeah.
Great. And I think there was also a video that circulated recently of from the marine archaeologists and the boat that was recovered. Have people seen that? We could, if you haven't, we could hunt that out and send it round. I think it was Andrew. That would be great. Thanks. Slowly joining some of the pieces back together. It will never quite be the same though, will it? So I guess we're after members to form a working group to look at management.
Yes, so, please.
Erin?
Yes, please.
Cheryl?
Yes, please.
Shane? Cindy? Michael?
Yes, thank you.
And look, anyone is free to, I think these working groups that we've put forward, if people want to join them and you've missed your run this evening, you're more than welcome. I can't see a hand from Jan or Gay, but if you'd like to join those working groups, please let us know. And again, I'll tag along as chair.
Madam Chair,
yes.
May I ask a question of
you may.
Andrew? Since this was presented to the last term of the Heritage Advisory Committee, has there been any progression from council in terms of council's intentions with these objects and artifacts? Has there been any development of ideas or suggestions for a space or a repository or funding for some form of interpretation that may inform the advice that the committee gives?
So basically, the artifacts are currently stored in our house, and I guess we're really looking for input from this working group as to what we do. So there's no set ideas in terms of that at this stage yet.
So bring your ideas. And the final item is the interim heritage order on 3 New Street, Windsor, which is something that I referred to previously. Does someone want to speak to this?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So this represents the other side of, we have heritage studies and we have matters that come before the council that require urgent attention. This is one of those items. So we had advice late last year when I started with council that a property was under threat. We did our homework. We did an assessment. We believed this property was under threat. We took action and we basically are at this stage where we put an interim heritage order on the site just before Christmas Eve. And we've been working with the property owner since that time. So we, in hand, we've given them heritage advice through Otto. So we've walked with them to basically come to a point where they're agreeable to the whole situation. So the matter went before council with an independent heritage report. The property owner didn't stand up and object to that. And we expect them to work with us in the future as we put a heritage listing on the property to save this property and then put some multi-unit development behind that property, behind that particular building that's being kept. So it is a good news story and it's an expensive story and it involves a lot of work. So it's not an ideal story either, but it's about reacting to a threat. Council did that. Council did the right thing. I think the owner sees that as well. And it's a good news story, but it's not a path we'd like to follow.
And this is a property that was presented to council, I think, when I was first on the Heritage Advisory Committee back in around 2008 or so. This was a property that was recommended for listing. Council refused to list this and a number of other, about 400 other properties, in fact. And so here we are. It was very expensive, in the order of, I think we spent about $20,000-$30,000 on this process. It was
not that expensive.
Not
though.
that expensive.
It's about $7,000 for the independent heritage assessment.
But I think the estimate that came to council was significantly higher from memory, because it takes up a whole lot of staff time as well. So it's a really suboptimal way to deal with heritage protection. The good news is that we managed to save this one in time. The property next door to it wasn't so lucky, which is in part the reason that this property was flagged as being under threat, because we'd already lost one. So we have to stop this. It's not good enough. And it's in fact these 20th century properties that are incredibly vulnerable because they don't quite meet the current ways people want to live in houses, but they also tend to slide under the radar, where people would get overexcited about a colonial property being under threat. They tend to miss these between the wars developments, which is a real shame, because they're spectacular houses very often. This one's extraordinary. If you look at the details in it, the ceilings are beautiful, and there's some lovely decorative timber work on the front as well. But that's largely provided for your information, and a bit of a yes, it was good, but no, we don't want to keep doing it. I think it was an interesting exercise for council to see that that's what happens if you don't put proper heritage protections in place. Michael?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it really highlights for the benefit of councillors the importance of a heritage study, because it's proactive, it's not reactive.
Ooh.
And it gives property owners certainty when they know their property is listed, rather than if I buy this, is council going to slap an arch on it tomorrow? Whilst an interim heritage order is a legitimately legislated process under the Heritage Act to go through. The importance is that throwing everything to a heritage study gives property owners certainty in moving forward in knowing, is this property listed, is it not? And yes, there'll be things that fall through the cracks. There'll be items that get missed because they're not seen, or and as society changes, what we value changes as well. And so heritage listings are never going to be static. There will always be a need to periodically review listings. But it is really important that we throw everything that we have, and council throws everything they have at progressing the heritage study to make sure that we don't have situations where council's wasting money in ad hoc interim heritage orders, which takes staff time and resources and really gets property owners offside because it catches them by surprise.
We were lucky that this owner, I think, was willing to go through the process and was happy to amend their plans, because if they'd dug in, it would have been much more difficult, I think. Graham?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to add to that, this is a classic example, as Michael says. It is a costly thing, but I do want to acknowledge the actual quality of the report that was done by Noel Ridley Smith, because it was a good assessment of that particular property. But I also want to acknowledge that Otto's time is valuable too. It's not just the cost of the report to council, it's Otto's time and staff time, which are in the thousands of dollars as well. So it really is a very expensive way of travelling. And yes, let's hope that the councillors do get the word that having a decent, complete heritage study is the way to go.
And I think it was also useful, I think, in that the owner is still able to realise some benefit from owning that property. It hasn't completely quarantined the property from any development or that town, that that very central site in town from any further development as well. And so it's not quite I guess it's illustrative that a heritage listing isn't necessarily a terrible thing for an owner as well. So I think it's been a good learning curve for everybody. I think the other take-home message is, if you see something that's under threat, speak up. There is will within council to try and protect where we can. I'm sure you two have got a very long list. That brings us to the end, I think, which is good because it's 7:30, and I apologise that we've gone over time. Hopefully we'll be more swift when we're not trying to catch up with 6 months of not having met yet. Graham, are you wanting to make general business?
Sorry, I was just doing a little bit of delving through our minutes from last year. And the minutes from the 11th of March 2021 actually identified particular topics that had outstanding actions to them. And I don't think we've actually satisfied lots of those. And I just wanted to flag to the committee that we probably need to look at those things again that are still out there that we haven't actually, or the previous Heritage Advisory Committee hadn't actually seen and dealt with 100%.
Sure. So could you send that list through? I know the staff have got the list, but if you've annotated that list, if you could pass it along, that would be helpful. To Andrew. Yep. And then we can make sure that they're included in the next meeting. Michelle?
I just wanted to, I know there's been a long time in between being elected and the committee being approved. However, can I ask that when we probably won't have that amount of documentation again. We had a very short time to process it, and majority of people work, and it's a lot of material.
Yep.
And if the committee is to be effective, we need the opportunity to read through the documentation and so that we're prepared for the meeting.
Sure. So would you be happy with, say, a 2-week lead-in time for getting through the documents?
Yeah, well, we only had less than 2 days, so at least a week.
Sorry, 1 week? Yeah. So 1 week is, I think you've been given the same lead-in time as, you've probably been given the same lead-in time as councillors normally get with the business paper,
Yeah.
where we get it, we usually get the business paper on the Thursday night before the council meeting on Tuesday, but I do understand that you're all volunteers. Can we perhaps extend
Yeah,
that
we'll
time?
definitely be endeavouring to have the papers issued a week before the meeting. Yeah.
Is a week sufficient? Yeah. I'm aware that some of you are representing communities that you might want to consult with as well. So if you need extra time, particularly on certain items, if you could let us know, there's always opportunity for you to consult afterwards. But if you want extra time, particularly for perhaps culturally sensitive items, please let us know so that we can provide that for you.
Thank you.
I think we're done. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next time. Do we have dates for the next one?